My Lords, I'm grateful to the noble Lord Hogan Howe, for initiating this debate. If noble Lords will indulge me, I thought this was my first opportunity truly to welcome the noble Lord the Minister to his new role. And I thought it was, since it has been, he himself has brought it up, it was worth mentioning that in fact we first worked together. I calculate it was 25 years ago when I was a Vice Chairman of the London Council's Transport and Environment Committee, which I later chaired, and he at that time was Managing Director of Surface Transport at Transport for London. Later he was the Commissioner and I sat on the board. We overlapped for about 7 years. Much of that time I was Deputy Chairman. We worked together. We both had firm views that one of us was working for the other, but I'm not entirely sure that they were absolutely concurrent if names were slotted into those particular sentences, but we had a very effective partnership. Perhaps his greatest achievement during that time was the stunning contribution that Transport for London made to the success of the 2012 Olympic and Paralympic Games, and he went on from that, of course, he spent the last 9 years as Chairman of Network Rail, and as his latest achievement, of course, is managing an almost balletically deft transition from the crossbenches to the Labour front bench. Who noticed that happening at the time? So I thought it was worth mentioning those things, but he is knowledgeable and effective, and I was rather hoping for somebody when I took on this role who wouldn't be. But there we are. There we are. Turning to the, and there was a wide choice. Turning to the substance of the debate, as the noble Lord Hogan Howe and my noble friend Lady Mackintosh of Pickering pointed out, Conservative ministers commissioned the Cycle Safety Review in 2017, and last year ministers supported proposals to change the law in the Criminal Justice Bill to create a new offence of causing death by careless or inconsiderate cycling. The bill fell at dissolution earlier this year. So one of the questions, and there are so many questions, of course, that arose in the course of our debate, that few of mine are going to be original. But one of the questions I think the whole House is genuinely interested in is whether the government intends to bring back that measure and so fill what I think is generally regarded as a lacuna in the range of sentences available in the event, admittedly a rare event, of death and serious injury caused to cyclists. When I first became a local government councillor, I had some advice from a very wise council officer that I should never allow myself to get into the middle of an argument between the pro-dog people and the anti-dog people. And a similar sort of advice might apply, I discovered later in life, to the pro- and anti-cycling people. And there has been a slight flavour of that, although, of course, at a most distinguished and elevated level in the course of our debate today. So I'm going to try and avoid that as far as possible. I simply want to say, and it is incumbent on the government to provide this, that we do need a roads policy that delivers for all road users, that keeps people safe and ensures they can go about their daily lives as freely, as efficiently as possible. And it is that test that the official opposition is going to be applying when we hold the government to account on matters related to cycling and so forth. But there is one point I would add to that I think is of importance to all of us, and it was illustrated by the speech, the amusing but terrifying speech made by my noble friend Lord Shinkwin, and that is the special responsibility we have to those who are disabled. And I would include in that those with less obvious disability, simply the disabilities of age, those of us who are less able to dodge out of the way than we were, maybe than we think we still are, but than we were some years ago, and who take more time to cross the road and so forth. And I do think it's incumbent on the government, and it has, I think, not been fully addressed, to make the recognition of the vulnerability of the disabled a central feature of the management of their roads policy. How they do that is very much up for them. There are two issues there in relation to disability that I want to mention, in addition to the sort of moving traffic incident that was mentioned by my noble friend. The first is the litter of dockless bikes, which is very difficult to negotiate for pedestrians in general, but in particular for those who are in wheelchairs or suffer from vision disabilities. And the other is, of course, the increasing use of cycle lanes that go behind bus stops, so between the pavement and the bus stop. These are frequently found, certainly in London, maybe elsewhere. Does the government have a view on those, and is it going to develop them? Now, the previous government concluded, and this remains, I think, our view on the front bench here, that the cost and complexity of introducing a mandatory bicycle licensing system would outweigh the benefits of such a scheme. But it is now very much in the lap of the party opposite to decide if that is still their view, and I think we would like to know about it. But when we come to the question of licensing, and there was much discussion of this, and of course we're bearing in mind there are two separate schemes of licensing. One is licensing a vehicle and giving it a registration plate, and the other is licensing a person to use that vehicle. When it comes to licensing, I think we're suffering to some extent from the advance of technology and our difficulties in grappling with it. Back in the day, of course, it was all very straightforward. You had a thing which in my father's generation was known as a push bike, pedal cycle, and then you had something that was called a motorbike, and it was perfectly clear what the difference between them was. But now we have electric cycles which comply with the electrically assisted pedal cycles rules, are limited to 15.5 miles an hour, and do generally require some sort of pedaling to make them move. But we have, in the last government, a consultation on legitimising bicycles which would have double the wattage available, but also would be what are called, I think the expression was used, twist and go, where you turn a throttle and the bike starts, where basically you won't need to pedal on the thing at all, because it'll power itself as it goes forward. And of course there comes a point where you're overlapping with mopeds, where mopeds are, of course, do require licensing, both of the person and of the vehicle. And the distinction between these two is breaking down, in my view. And of course, just to complete the picture, beyond mopeds, which can be driven permanently on a provisional license, which is simply renewable. You can do anything on a moped, except go on the motorway with a provisional license. And a lot of the people, the reason they all have L plates that was referred to is that they never get a proper license. And this is true of large numbers of delivery drivers and so forth, but also others. But of course, for a full motorcycle, you need a proper license. So the system has become incoherent, and I don't think commands respect anymore. And the outgoing government, I accuse them, didn't address this issue, but I do think it will fall very firmly into the lap of the new government, that they will have to take a proper schematic view of what the licensing scheme should be for the whole range of two-wheelers, because that old distinction between the push bike and the powered two-wheeler no longer exists in the way it did. I will just come briefly to illegal e-bikes. I don't understand why there are illegal e-bikes. Are they imported, or are they the result of illicit adaptation? And who is doing this adaptation? And is it being done on a commercial basis? And if it is, why aren't they being stopped? But these are questions I don't understand. There may or may not be answers to them. In March this year, police data showed that the number of illegal e-bikes confiscated by the police doubled in 2023 compared with 2022, and there were 260 in the whole country. 260 were seized. There were 130 in 2022, only 61 in 2021. Part of that is explicable, of course, by lockdown, that increase in numbers from 2021 through to 2023. But it is good to see the numbers going up, but I suspect it is merely a drop in the ocean, and I wonder what intentions the government have when it comes to enforcing the existing rules. And finally we come to e-scooters. Now here I do think the last Conservative government was totally wimpish. As was explained by noble lords, they are illegal, but they are legal if you are riding them as part of a licensed scheme. The scheme is a trial. The trial has been extended perpetually, I fear, because ministers didn't want to grapple with the decision whether to legalise them or not, and in what circumstances. And as I say, I accuse my own colleagues, my own side, of not bringing that to a conclusion. But it cannot be escaped. This trial cannot be continued forever. There will have to be a decision, and it would be very helpful if the noble Lord the Minister could tell us today what he thought that decision might be. So I'm grateful to the noble Lord Hogan Howe, for his speech, for initiating the debate, and I look forward very much to hearing from the noble Lord the Minister. There has been a great deal said today. I hope he will listen to it all and present us with a properly synthesised policy in due course.